Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. You're probably wondering why my voice is echoing right now. That's because I'm actually in a root cellar. Now this is basically like a cellar in an old basement. They would put stuff in here. My grandfather used to actually make wine in here. That's why there's so many wine glasses over there. It's cleaned out now. It used to be like really packed in here with wine stuff. But anyways, so I was gonna do this outside because it's actually snowing. But then I remembered I don't like snow. So, anyways, the Battle of Stalingrad was fought between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. Now, it's pretty interesting because on one side you have a far right political dictator. On the other side, you have a far left political dictator. One's fascist, one's communist. Now, this is what Germany's using. This is the K98K. This is what they're going into battle with. And you see it's a nice short rifle, it's got a nice short bayonet. It's not a carbine though. Now this is chambered in 8mm and Mauser. It has a 3-position safety. Now, this is the M9130 Mosin gun. This is what Soviet Union is going into war with. Now the Soviet Union, Russia didn't really learn much from World War I because they just made their rifles a hair shorter, because they used to be just a little bit longer than that. Their dragoons were about this long. I guess that's why they made them short. But then later on, you'll see they'll start swapping over to carbines. But yeah, they didn't learn much, and they struggled for it in Stalingrad. Now, anyways, they did have carbines being used by like artillery or cavalry or something like that, but mainly they're going to be using this. Now, Germany had a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union, and then later Hitler just invaded the Soviet Union because he thought, screw it. It almost worked for Napoleon. It might work for me, right? Nah, it didn't work too well. Now, the reason I'm in a root cellar is because, one, I don't like snow. I already told you that. But the other reason is the Battle of Stalingrad was literally fought in the city. And the Russians, they would go anywhere. They would go in the sewers, inside of buildings. They'd probably even fight in a room about this big against the Germans. Now, the Russians, they don't have as good a rifle as Germany, but what Russia doesn't have in quality, they have in numbers. Now, the Russians actually suffered severe losses during the Battle of Stalingrad. But the reason the Russians won is because what they were doing is, one thing, Hitler was going to Moscow, and then he decided to pull out of Moscow and go to Stalingrad because it bore the name of Stalin. And if you can take that, then what would that make Stalin look like? Not too good. Then morale would go down and eventually the Soviet Union would falter. But what the Russians were doing is they were doing called a scorched earth tactic. Now basically they run over, they kill all the animals, they burn all the crops. That way the invading military cannot live off the land. Same thing they did with Napoleon. By the time Napoleon got to Moscow, he had lost half of his army. Now, Germany didn't really lose half of their army, but as soon as they got into Stalingrad, now it's snowing, and you don't have the proper clothing. So you don't have proper clothing, you don't have the proper food, and they found that actually a good chunk of their soldiers were starving to death, so they thought, okay, we need to get food in there now. Now they're getting food in there, and once you get hungry, your stomach gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So they eat a lot of food, and their stomach would just basically burst. Pretty much the same thing happened, unfortunately, to the people in the concentration camps. When they were liberated, people would give them food, and they'd unfortunately pass away because of that food. Very dark time in history. Now, the Russians were actually pretty well dressed. They're used to the climate, and they're actually kind of well fed. Now, Stalin actually, for some reason, he didn't evacuate the civilians, so a lot of these civilians were still just stuck in Stalingrad while this whole battle was taking place. It's really just chaotic and constant bombardment from artillery, and then you have infantry involved in that, and most of it is close quarters. Now, if you look at this Mauser, it's a short rifle. You can see, I'll move over here. I can kind of move it around with this thing. Let me take the bayonet off, actually. There we go. Now, let me see if I can move it in here. Got some freedom. Now, if we look at this Nagant, now the Russians would keep the bayonets on their rifles because they believed it was a necessity. And they were actually sighted in with the bayonet on, so if you're most of the guys not shooting accurately, put the bayonet on. And as you can see, touching there, touching there. This would not be good in house-to-house combat. That's why when they were going into Berlin, they made the M44 Mosin, which is basically just a carbine with a folding bayonet. It's a whole lot shorter. Same caliber, same design. It's just a carbine, that's all it is. Now, the Germans would eventually have to pull out of Stalingrad, and I think it was the 8th Army. Actually, when they got there, they're like, okay, we can't take it, forget it, we're just gonna surrender. And a lot of the German soldiers that surrendered there, a good chunk of them actually did die in a concentration camp. I think like almost 75% of them. And the rest of them wouldn't see Germany until I think the 1950s, late 1950s. So that just goes to show, I mean, the Russians, when they got to Germany, they didn't even care. They came in, forgot how many women, but a lot of women were actually, unfortunately, raped to death by the Russian soldiers. They would execute people just there, but the Germans did the same thing. Now, there's atrocities committed on both sides to every conflict. Now, can't say the Russians are bad, can't say the Germans are bad. Well, the Germans are bad for, putting people in concentration camps, but the Russians did the same thing. Now, on one side, you got someone who's discriminating and killing people for just their race or religion. On the other side, you got a guy who's killing people because they don't agree with him. Stalin ended up killing more people than Hitler, but Hitler killed just anyone he deemed undesirable. Stalin killed anyone who didn't agree with him. It's very unfortunate. Now, the Mauser has a 3-position safety, which I can operate it with one hand. Let me see. Safe. Half safe. I hold the trigger, but I can operate the bolt. And then you got fire. Now, I'm not going to operate the safety on the Mosin Nagant. I do have another video where I can. Basically, I put my foot on it and I hold it down and I operate it. But just watch one of my other videos. I'm sure you'll find it. Just look for one with a Mosin Nagant in it. Now, personally, I think the Germans had the better rifle. But at the end of the day, you can make more of these than you can these in a short amount of time. And the Russians had way more people than the Germans. Now, I know, well, in the Battle of Thermopylae, 300 Spartans held off, a whole lot of Greeks. Yeah, they did, but the Persians had way more guys, and they were eventually overwhelmed by them. They didn't even have very good equipment. The Greeks had very good equipment, still held them off, but overwhelming numbers. Now, the Russians actually had the most casualty rates of World War II. And that would be the last conflict they really fought. Well, they did invade Czechoslovakia and they did take over Poland, but the next biggest conflict that the Russians will fight would be in Afghanistan. Afghanistan. So yeah, now this one's actually pretty cool. This is a Russian capture Mauser. Now the Russians captured it, they put these stupid screws in there. But this one was actually made in 1944. And yeah, so it was captured, made in 1944, captured by the Russians, and then probably sent somewhere else. Now, my Mosin Nagant is actually made in 1926. If I can show you it, yeah. You can see right there, 1926, you can see the hammer and sickle there. A whole lot of Russian writing. If you know what this says, please let me know. Try and get it on there. I don't speak Russian and I don't write in Russian, so. Yeah, and it was made in Izhevik, or Izhevik, however you want to pronounce it. Again, I don't speak Russian. So anyways, yep, that's the Battle of Stalingrad. Hope you guys enjoyed. Please like and subscribe, and I'll be sure to make another video. Bye.